Please, God.
This is God.
The name Freddy Krueger is iconic. He's at the top of the list with the greatest slasher horror villains of all time, along with Leatherface, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Chucky, and Ghostface, with a career now spanning 35 years. And after 9 films, a TV show, documentaries, video games, and comic books, Freddy Krueger is still relevant across today's pop culture landscape, making appearances in Mortal Kombat, Dead by Daylight, Robot Chicken, Rick and Morty, and The Goldbergs.
Who do you think you are?
Your worst nightmare.
In this video, I'm going to examine the original Nightmare on Elm Street 7 film series, dissecting what made the series work so well, while also exploring the bad decisions and creative pitfalls that eventually led to its downfall, culminating in the day A Nightmare on Elm Street died. So much of the series' lasting success comes from the original film that started it all, A Nightmare on Elm Street. In the midst of slasher popularity permeating the horror landscape since the 1970s with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween, and into the 80s with Friday the 13th, writer-director Wes Craven was able to create a story that revolved around a unique concept with an original villain. Whereas most other slasher villains at the time wore dark drab colors and expressionless masks while wielding knives, machetes, or other weapons in order to kill their victims, Freddy Krueger wore a red and green striped sweater, a fedora, and of course his trademark metal-clawed glove. Not only was his weapon unique, but the way in which he killed his victims was unique as well. Freddy didn't attack under the bed, in the closet, or at some cabin in the woods. Freddy attacked his victims where there was no escape, in their dreams. And the fact that Freddy attacked while people slept washed the entire film and its subsequent entries in a dread of inevitability. You can try drinking coffee or taking caffeine pills, but there is no escape from it. You have to sleep sometime. It was a terrifying concept. And perhaps one of the main reasons why Nightmare on Elm Street stood apart from other slasher series was because of Freddy Krueger's personality. Most other slasher villains hid their personalities behind a mask. They became a menacing presence that stalked their victims. And although the mask does add a sense of unknown, which is scary in its own right, it didn't particularly elevate the villains or differentiate them from one another. Freddy never shied away from showing off his burned, disfigured face. He toyed with his victims like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. And so much of the character's success came from actor Robert Englund. He perfectly embodied the character, bringing him to life and giving him so much of his personality through his demeanor and mannerisms. As bad as the series became in later entries, and it did get bad, Robert Englund's performance as Freddy always made the Nightmare movies at least watchable. Wes Craven helped shape the tone and aesthetic of the film from behind the camera as well. He employed the same creative tactic that Spielberg did with the shark in Jaws, and Ridley Scott did with the xenomorph in Alien, by barely showing the monster on screen. The unknown is far scarier than what we can see, and that's a large reason why Freddy Krueger is only visible on screen for 7 minutes of the original film. When Freddy was shown, it was through obscure close-ups and in shadows, hinting at the terror. And one of the main reasons why the original film still holds up so well after all these years is because of the fantastic practical effects. Tina's death and Glenn's death are highlights, but even smaller effects like Freddy haunting Nancy in her bed and in the bathtub are simple but still very effective. The only misstep of the entire film is probably the ending. It was an incoherent ending that seemed to undo everything that came before it, and that's exactly why Wes Craven hated the ending too. Craven always envisioned Nightmare as a single standalone film, but president of New Line Cinema Bob Shaye insisted on a sequel tease. I felt that the film should end when Nancy turns her back on Freddy and his violence. That's the only thing that kills him. Bob wanted to have Freddy pick up the kids in a car and drive off, which reversed everything I was trying to say. It suddenly presented Freddy as triumphant. I came up with a compromise, which was to have the kids get in the convertible, and when the roof comes down, we'd have Freddy's red and green stripes on it. Do I regret changing the ending? I do, because it's the one part of the film that isn't me. The next year, Bob Shaye got his wish with the release of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. A film reviled by many fans because it's so disconnected from the rest of the series and for changing the rules of the world. As opposed to killing in the dream world, Freddy kills in the real world through possession of the main character, Jesse. There's a particularly jarring scene near the end of the movie where Freddy runs around a pool party killing children. Besides one cool moment,
You are all my children now.
the rest of the scene isn't really scary at all. And that's because what made Freddy scary in the first place was the unknown. Slight glances and hints obscured by darkness that makes him feel larger than life. A towering presence that attacks us when we're isolated and alone. So to see him scurrying around a swimming pool with a bunch of teenagers who are taller than him made him look more silly than scary. Despite all these missteps, I still actually enjoyed this film. Again, the use of practical effects throughout the film is fantastic. The scene where Freddy literally bursts from Jesse's body is a triumph. But besides that, I really enjoyed watching the film because of its much publicized homoerotic subtext. A subtext that apparently the cast and crew weren't aware of while making the film, and the screenwriter only admitted to decades later. Jessie played a role so often written as female in the slasher subgenre that it has become known as the final girl, or scream queen. In the film, Jesse struggles to repress something inside him that is trying desperately to get out. People like to point out Jesse's dance scene, when he goes to a gay bar, the gym teacher tied up in the shower and whipped, when Jesse runs away from his girlfriend to sleep with his friend.
Something is trying to get inside my body.
Yeah, and she's female and she's waiting for you in the cabana. And you want to sleep with me.
And all the high-pitched shrieks throughout the film. Now, none of this is overtly mentioned in the script, and the idea of paralleling repressed homosexuality with the murderous inclination is troubling when you think about it. But watching the film with this subtextual lens helped elevate what would otherwise have been a mediocre, bland horror movie into something interesting and never boring. Following up Freddy's Revenge was the third entry in the series, Dream Warriors. The film was a return to form for the franchise, with Wes Craven back in a writing capacity and Heather Langenkamp reprising her role as Nancy. Dream Warriors did what all the best franchise sequels should do. It added to the mythology without taking away anything that happened before, while also managing to reintroduce past characters that we already cared about and balancing them with new characters that we ultimately cared about just as much. And that's the best part about Dream Warriors, the characters. They're a diverse group with their own hopes, fears, strengths, and weaknesses. They're all the last remaining Elm Street children, which gave Freddy a much-needed motivation for his attacks. And the dynamic between the children was changed as well. These aren't unsuspecting children in high school classrooms, the usual location that's often overplayed in the series. These are children who have been through trauma, coping and struggling to survive in a psychiatric hospital, and they aren't passive victims. They use Kristen's telekinetic powers in order to share the same dream, discover their dream powers, and fight back against Freddy. After the group was able to successfully lay Freddy's bones to rest and Nancy had her sacrificial send-off, it felt like definitive closure. But after its biggest box office returns yet, along with a growing fanbase, New Line Cinema continued churning out more sequels. The very next year, on August 19, 1988, the fourth installment, Dream Master, was released. And it's within the first act of Dream Master where A Nightmare on Elm Street died. Everything that made Dream Warriors so great, the characters, Freddy's motivation, the closure, was all undone at the beginning of Dream Master. The three remaining Elm Street children, Kristen, who was recast, Kincaid, and Joey, are still friends and happy that Freddy is gone for good, but a series of bad dreams leads Kristen to believe that Freddy might be coming back. Later, Kincaid has a dream, his dog pees fire, resurrecting Freddy's body, and he's killed. Joey's killed in his waterbed, and then Kristen has a goofy dream on a beach where Freddy does this, before killing her too. After building up the last remaining Elm Street children in Dream Warriors, they're killed so unceremoniously in Dream Master, and this moment set off bad storytelling habits that rippled throughout the remainder of the franchise. First, Freddy wasn't scary anymore. There were hints of this in Dream Warriors when Freddy's personality began to shine through more and more, but Dream Warriors still managed to strike a fine balance. However, throughout Dream Master and Dream Child, Freddy became goofier and goofier until he basically became Bugs Bunny in the sixth installment, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. The other bad habit set off in the first act of Dream Master was, second, the lack of motivation and interesting characters. From the beginning of the series, Freddy's entire motivation was to seek revenge on the children of the parents who killed him. That clearly defined motivation made the first and third movie so engaging. We understood why Freddy was doing what he was doing. But once the last Elm Street child was killed off in Dream Master, it just became killing for killing's sake. And that left us with boring, uninteresting characters that were hard to root for, and no semblance of a story to tie everything together. The rest of the series just played out like Final Destination movies, where you're just waiting to see the creative ways these boring characters are going to get killed off. That was really the only fun part about the later Nightmare installments, but that made for such boring, repetitive stories. The strongest movies in the series were when it was less about the dreams and more about the characters. But with each installment, the dreams and Freddy took more and more of the focus, and the films were worse because of it. When it seemed like the Nightmare franchise was dead and buried, Wes Craven peed fire on the grave of the franchise and resurrected it one last time with the film New Nightmare, the first Nightmare film written and directed by Wes Craven since the original. Wes tried to right many of the wrongs of the franchise by bringing back characters the audience cared about, making Freddy serious again, providing motivation as to why Freddy is back, and actually giving the characters a goal of how to stop him. Unfortunately, the final product wasn't scary at all. It slogged along for a majority of the film, with sporadic earthquakes, eerie phone calls, cracks in the walls, and one creepy as hell kid. But what the film lacked in scares, it made up for it with an excellent meta-concept that provided a commentary on fear, fandom, and the power of stories. And even though the meta-style of storytelling didn't necessarily work in New Nightmare, it paved the way for a new style of horror storytelling that would be perfected in Scream, the film Wes Craven would go on to make just 2 years later.
Freddy Krueger.
Freddy, that's right. I like that movie. It was scary.
Wow, well the first one was, but the rest sucked.
New Nightmare wasn't able to save the franchise that had already been dead for years. But with its multiple callbacks to the original film through kills, characters, and bits of dialogue, it ended up being the perfect love letter to the Nightmare on Elm Street series, its loyal fans, and the lasting legacy it left behind. This video was brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace will help you make beautiful custom websites for anything you might need. That could be a website to promote your business, a website for your wedding or baby registry, or maybe it's a website for your portfolio so you can better sell yourself and your talents to the world. In just a few clicks, you can have a website up and running with easy-to-use templates perfectly designed to work on computer, tablet, and mobile browsers. The process has never been easier. And what I love about Squarespace is that they even help you lock down your domain address. For me, I was able to search entertaintheelk.com, saw it was available, and it was mine just like that. So stop what you're doing and head over to squarespace.com/theelk so you can start building your own custom website. And be sure to use my code THEELK in order to get 10% off your first purchase. I hope you all enjoyed this video. As always, this is just my opinion, so tell me the day you think A Nightmare on Elm Street died, or tell me if you think it was great all the way through. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you all next time.